My name's Jackee Taylor, but that's not my real name. When I was 7 years old, I was put into witness protection. This is everything I'm authorized to tell you. No, we didn't get a new house, and no, we didn't get a new car, and no, we definitely did not get a briefcase full of money. People's assumptions of what goes on in the witness protection program is generated from Hollywood because nobody really knows what goes on besides people like me that are in it. The only aspect that Hollywood got right is how we were taken out of our beds by men in black in the middle of the night. Growing up, I believe I actually came home from the hospital to the Cleveland Hells Angel Clubhouse. And still to this day, I feel, I love that culture. There was a lot of family involvement. There were kids and moms, and we had backyard barbecues all the time. I thought it was normal for every man to have a blade on their belt, or I thought it was normal for them to all have pistols in their boots. My father was Butch Crouch. He was one of the founding members of the Banditos in Houston. So in about 1969, he took his coat off, his Banditos coat, and he was recruited by Sonny Barger to start some clubs up in the Northeast states. He ended up settling in Cleveland, Ohio, and became vice president of one of the Cleveland Hells Angels chapters up there. And that's where he met my mother. My father was no saint. His rap sheet in Louisiana and Texas alone was insane. I found it. He was very abusive to my mother. Right around 1974, 1975, the club started to fracture. The club was supposed to be voting on different things that happened, especially if a life was supposed to be taken. That had to be a unanimous decision. In 1975, a member of the Cleveland Hells Angels went rogue, I guess you could say, and decided that he was going to bomb a house. He wanted to, what was called, roll his bones. He wanted to get patched in. He did bomb that house with a couple other people, and he killed 3 people. That was a Sigley bombing, and an 18-month-old baby was killed along with his mother. At the time, I was the same age as the baby and running around the clubhouse. It really upset a lot of the club members, especially my father. I think that's when my father started to kind of branch off mentally from the club. Very, very early 1981, my mother actually left my father and took all of us children down to Florida to get away from him. And that's when my father really decided, okay, now my wife and children just left me. This isn't the life that I wanted. So my father left the club in about mid-1981, I believe. A person like my father could not walk away and be out good. So he knew he'd be out bad, which is not good for him or his family. So what my father decided to do was to call the ATF and to see if he offered them a lot of information on different crimes that had occurred, if they would place him and his family in witness protection. So he told the marshals that for him to further cooperate, that he wanted his wife and kids back. The marshals reached out to my mother and told my mother, we know that you left Butch, but now he turned government witness, and you have to come back to him. You have to come back to this abusive man, because now he's testifying against all these people, and you're all going to be killed if you don't go back with him and go into witness protection. When my father decided to turn on the club, he did rat everybody out. Yes, he was a rat, but he decided, well, if I'm going to do this right, I'm going to do it. I need to tell you guys something. I killed Donald Delisario. He had taken a life of an 18-year-old kid in a drive-by shooting that was intended for somebody else, and he didn't receive a reduced sentence. I believe he was given 10 to 40 in a federal prison. We were taken out of our beds. I was 7, my sister was 5, and my brother was 2. We were all absolutely terrified. We had no idea what was going on. My mother knew. My mother had been making plans secretly. When she would do laundry, she'd put a couple shirts away or a couple pairs of shorts. She couldn't take everything. I think she packed a suitcase for each kid. We were put into vans and taken to a hotel, switched vans, I remember that, and eventually reunited with my father. And then we went to a safe house. There's a handful of safe houses across the U.S., and we were put in one. It was a giant house with different wings on it. They made meals for us. The Marshals, I remember them cooking with their sidearms. I actually have a picture of us eating Thanksgiving dinner with the Marshals. We weren't permitted to leave. We weren't in prison by any means, but we couldn't leave without them. So I remember we went to Kmart. That was kind of a big thing. We all had to pile in the van, and we just did a little Kmart thing. I think we were in the safe house for about 3 months. From everything that I've heard from other people, it usually takes about 2 or 3 months for all the proper paperwork to be done to, create a new identity. The Marshals asked my mother and asked my father, name the top 3 places that you would like to live. So my mother, I believe, said California, Hawaii, and Florida. And my father probably said Texas, Louisiana, Florida, whatever. So they put us in Montana. All of my mother's best friends knew she loved going to California. That's why they put us in Montana. Nobody would ever suspect that we were in Montana. We were flown there. We came from Florida, so we were wearing Florida clothes. We were allotted about $12.61 a month back in 1981. We were put in a motel, the Esquire Motor Inn. This was a flea bag of a motel. It was disgusting. They bring us to Montana at the end of January, and it's snow, it's cold, we have no car, we have no winter clothes. Did they provide us winter clothes? No. So that $12.61 that we were allotted a month had to be immediately spent on, some winter gear. And we had to pay our hotel. They probably paid it the first month, I'm guessing. I found out later in life that my mother was really scrimping and scraping even that first month to feed us. There was absolutely no extra. If you ran out, you ran out, and that's tough. You're gonna have to figure out how to feed your family on $5 this week. Uncovering all that I've uncovered about different members being in witness protection is that there's a tier level. So the better testimony, the more convictions you get, the better life that you're going to have afterwards. My father didn't get any convictions at first. He did end up getting a conviction later. And I think that they were angry that my father didn't get any convictions. Oh, he was a crappy witness, let's just, we just got dumped there. We all got different social security numbers. Mine's from Wisconsin, a man who passed away in Wisconsin. I have his social security number. My mom's was from New York. We all have different prefixes, so it looks like we were all born in all different places. My mother had to start from scratch with her social security. So everything that she'd built up with social security, gone. She had to start all over again, so she had to work extra in her life. She has to cut off all of her family ties. She can never talk to her parents again. We were never permitted to talk to our grandparents who were, we were so close with. She wasn't even allowed to go talk to a counselor, and they didn't provide counseling. So how are you supposed to deal with that? So my mother did break protocol. She started calling her parents again. The biggest reason was mental support, but also financial support. Because my father he was going back and forth testifying. He was only in the house with us in Montana for right around a year. And then he went to prison for life. Everything was very sugar-coated with us children. Rightfully so, I guess. No kid wants to find out that her dad's a killer. But we were told that my father was going to work on a boat. It makes sense, because we weren't allowed to call him. We could write him letters, but, there was no talking to him on the phone and stuff like that, because he was going to be out at sea working very hard, and he would come into port, maybe once a month he'd be able to call us. My mother became angry that I wanted to go, live with my father, and I had all these fantasies about how wonderful my father was, and she's working her tail off as a nurse, and my father's in prison, not paying child support. All of us kids are talking about how hard daddy's working. And my mother eventually sat us down with the school counselor and told us the truth. It shattered me as a kid. I believe I was about 10 years old. I originally had a lot of anger how my mother told us children, because she said, your father's not working on a boat. He killed a kid and now and he went to prison. And I'll never forget the look of sadness on my counselor's face that it was told to us like that. I've forgiven her for how she told us. She didn't know any better. She was so incredibly traumatized by everything she went to and not having the ability or the resources to talk to anybody. Her mothering skills were starting to dissipate and take on a life of their own and get borderline abusive, and she needed help. She needed mom time, rightfully so. So she was secretly shipping us children off to Ohio like the day after school got out. So we spent all summer, every summer, secretly back in Ohio with my grandparents. After we were put into witness protection, the president of the Cleveland chapter went to my grandparents' house and talked to my grandfather. And he told my grandfather, Mary and the children are not in danger. You have my word. We just want Butch. My grandfather was a very good judge of character, and he knew that we were safe and that it was okay for us to come back and forth. My grandparents had this great place with lakes and piers, and we were fishing every day. And I don't remember being nervous as a kid going back to Ohio. I was just so happy to be back there. Jacqueline Angelique Crouch, that's my given name. And I don't know how they do it now or if this is typical of every case, but my mother actually chose our new name, our new last name. She'd always liked Elizabeth Taylor. So she decided we had to pick a real generic name, Smith, Brown, Taylor, something like that. And she had picked Taylor after Elizabeth Taylor. I had one of the notebooks where the kids can practice writing their letters. And I remember I had to fill up that whole book with my new name, Jacqueline Ann Taylor, over and over and over. I wrote that out. I got in trouble for lying as a child. And now I'm told that I have to lie to every person I know, or I could be killed or my family could be killed. Or if you see a motorcycle, that motorcycles are not good anymore. And then being told that hearing that sound, we have to hide. Those are bad guys now. That messes with a kid. Of course, I felt like I was different. But, I'm a 7-year-old kid and I was always a happy kid. But when we moved to Montana, everything changed. It was different. I was nervous to start school. When you're a teenager, you're curious about who you are and you start experimenting with drugs or alcohol. My thing was when I started drinking, I started talking. And I started talking too much and I started telling people. And then I was coined a liar. My best friends, to this day, I can't believe that I still can't believe that that's real, that you weren't full of it. Because we all thought that you were lying about it, Jackee. And I just kind of felt like an idiot and I'd drink more or do more, experiment with different drugs. And that ended up being a huge escape for me. I got in a lot of fights. I was stealing from cars. I was shoplifting. I went to rehab when I was 14 and then I was put in a psychiatric hospital when I was 15, and then I was put into a group home when I was after that. I'm in a psychiatric hospital and I'm telling my psychiatrist that where all of this is stemming from, and I'm not being believed. So now, I'm being misdiagnosed. I remember laying in bed one night in this psychiatric institution thinking to myself, I'm going to just have to figure out how to deal with this by myself. Nobody's ever going to believe me. It's just a fundamental part of life. We all need to know who we are, where we came from. I didn't have those answers, and they were shrouded in secrecy to where I had to look in the newspaper, finding articles about my dad, hours and hours and hours of research, and finding these articles about my father. Growing up and not having this information and not knowing why I was even on the witness protection program really propelled me to just kind of launch my own investigative journey and storm the federal building in 1993, I believe it was. When I got into who I needed to talk to that day, I got scolded and eventually escorted out of the federal building. I wasn't allowed to go into the federal building and even tell a marshal that I was on witness protection. I didn't know that. As an adult, I have never signed anything. I have never had an agent sit me down and tell me this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. So right now they're calling me a breached member of security, but am I? How can I breach a contract that I have no idea what that contract even entails? So no, I am not a breached member. I am still a member. The issues that I've had and that what I've come across in my work is a lot of people were not given birth certificates or their social security numbers were messed up. Now you have to remember back in 1971 when the program was first initiated and the first family was put into protective custody, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have everything all tied together. Now it's flagging on a home loan that I tried to get, an SBA loan, small business loan. And what can they do about that? They can't really give me a new social security number. At this point, I'm 51 years old. I believe back in about 1985, my mom wanted to sign us up for softball and Girl Scouts, things like that. Back then, you needed birth certificates. All I know is that the judge back then refused to give us birth certificates. So I've never had a birth certificate under my name. I only have a social security card, and they had given us passports back then. So remember, I was put into witness protection in 1981. 1997, 16 years later, I'm trying to get a marriage license and I'm trying to also go to college. I don't have a birth certificate. The lady in the Yellowstone County courthouse absolutely refused. I'm like, call the marshals. Well, they're not going to acknowledge that I'm in WITSEC. What he did say to that lady was, I can attest that she does not have a birth certificate. She is Jackee Taylor. Please issue her a marriage license. She said, okay, thank you. Hung up and said, nope, still not going to do it. Go to the next county and try them. So I almost couldn't get married. Now I'm trying to go to college. Back then, I had to sit down with the admissions board and plead my case. Thank goodness, my next door neighbor who I'd babysat for, she didn't know I was on the witness protection program until that day that I sat down the college admissions board. She was head of it. And I just remember her looking at me going, when I was telling my story. So I was able to get into college pretty much because of somebody that I knew that knew me and that knew that my name has always been Jackee Taylor. So I did actually reach out and I did obtain my old birth certificate, but I can't use it. That's a federal offense. I can't go back to my old identity. I have to go through the courts, blah, blah, blah. At this stage in my life, it's pointless. So 45 years later, I'm still struggling with all these problems. I have been paying taxes. I have been a working member of society since 1990. 2017 was the last time that they accepted my tax file when I filed my taxes. So when my father originally got out of prison, he served about 8 years of his sentence. He was moved again and given the name Paul Dome. He met a lady. They ended up getting married, and they bought a little chunk of property out in East Texas, and he settled there for, I think, about 11 years. Right about 2006, I had visited my aunt down in Louisiana, and she asked me, do you want to go see your daddy? And I went, because I still had so much hatred for him. I thought, well, maybe I could go down there and at least kneecap him or something. So I had intentions of hurting him. I didn't tell her that, but she took me that week to go see him. And then he opened the door and there's this crippled old man standing in front of me that happened to be my daddy. And all that anger, all my plans of retaliation to this man who destroyed so many lives just melted away. It was actually very healing and cathartic. And we kind of started having a father-daughter relationship again. He seemed more docile, I guess, but that's not the case. That's not how it ended. In 2013, I had taken my kids down to Disney World and SeaWorld, and then we went and we were in the Keys, and my aunt called me, laying in my hotel bed the last night of my wonderful trip down to Disney World with my kids. I find out that my father had done these terrible things. My father took the life of his wife, took the life of his stepson, sat in the Texas heat for 3 days, pondering what he just did, and then took his own life. He ended up burning the house down. And while the house was on fire, he was sitting in his car. And when the fire department pulled up, is when he ended his life. My father wasn't a good man. And now he's an old, crippled man out in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And nobody's keeping an eye on this man who has admitted to taking many, many lives. I ended up going back down there, and I went down there to actually bury my stepmother and my stepbrother. I told them to put my father in a box and throw him in the Red River. As far as I know, he took their lives. But then I started digging into what the sheriffs saved for me. He left me a big black steamer trunk full of pictures, letters to the U.S. Marshals, letters to the Social Security Administration. He had written a manuscript. He kept every letter that he ever wrote, in prison, out of prison, everything. And I started digging into his trunk and digging into these letters that he wrote and finding out a month before he passed away, wrote a pleading letter to the marshals, begging the marshals to help him so that he could go get medical care. We all know that when we're in physical pain, it can take a toll on our mental health. I had no idea that she was sick. I had no idea that his stepson had terminal brain cancer. And I had no idea that my father was in such dire straits with his physical health as well. I thought that these killings were in cold blood. I didn't know. I didn't know the surrounding circumstances. I'm not condoning anything that he did because he shouldn't have done it. But he wasn't thinking clearly because he was in so much physical pain. At the end of the day, it's still Butch Crouch. I found out so much about myself and my past through his death and what he left for me. My father wrote this manuscript. It's 1,100 pages depicting outlaw biker culture, his experiences from 1966 to 1981. Everything that he did, everybody he saw, every run that he made, all club activities are depicted in this manuscript. And I found like the gold mine of outlaw biker history. Also in the big steamer trunk that he left me were his patches. So this particular club, you do not possess the patches ever, unless they're on the back of your coat. I actually went back to Cleveland, and I went unannounced, and I did the cold knock on the clubhouse door, and the guy opened the door, and I said, "Hi, I'm Jackee Taylor. I'm Butch Crouch's daughter. I'm here to return his patches. He's dead." It's just something that I had to do out of respect. The president called me within a day or two. I spoke to him on the phone that day, and we went and had a sit-down dinner together. And this is a man that babysat me. You know, he told me, "Jack, you guys were never in danger. We would have never hurt you or your mother. Are you kidding me? You know, we loved you guys. I changed your diapers. I would have never done that to you." And that I was comforting, but the anger that started to build inside me towards the marshals is something that I'll never even be able to articulate properly. It was all for nothing. They were never after us. They wanted my father. Of course they wanted my father, but they were never after us. My mother was so beloved throughout the club. She was their nurse. She was their cake decorator. She took care of all of them. I was listening to the adults around me that were telling me they were going to kill me. So, you know, it was nice to hear that I wasn't in danger anymore, or that I never was. I finally felt safe for once in my life. So now it's starting to affect my children. Third generation witness protection problems. My children's Medicaid was canceled because I don't have a birth certificate. And I spent 2 days on the phone calling the marshals, calling anybody that would listen, and eventually calling the governor's office, talking to his aide. No help, nobody. It was just a baton passing for 2 days. That's what propelled me and threw me into the media. My mom always said something that stuck with me. If all else fails, go to the papers. And that's what I've done. And I'm not going away. I'm just going to get louder. So the first article in 2010 came out in the Sunday Gazette. 1 or 2 days later, I got the call. And I looked at my phone and I knew immediately that it was the marshals. So they just want to get me out of the media. People have reached out to me over the years that have similar issues like I do, wanting advice or help, or what did you do? And yes, there's avenues that you can take to get this, and that. And I've been an advocate to these people, for these people, because they still can't come out of hiding. They don't want to get in trouble, but nobody's answering their phone calls. So who do they call? They call me. I've kind of formed a little coalition amongst us and a little group of us. Since I went public, my efforts have kind of changed a little bit into helping those around me that are suffering from the same problems, because number one, nobody believes them. Number two, I'm the only one who understands what they're going through. I'm not advocating so much for the adults that made the decision to go into witness protection because they made the choice. I'm advocating for the children that did not make that choice. My big thing also is, advocating for mental health in the program. We need counseling, for gosh sakes. We definitely need to form some sort of a committee to oversee their actions and their policies and how they are treating their members. As much as I've spoken out about the marshals, I would love to come and work for them and to help them rectify this situation so I can finally shut up and go on with my life. These people also want to go on with their life, but I can't stop because I'm their voice. And that I wouldn't be able to go on living with myself knowing that they're all struggling. I lost one of the gals that has been reaching out to me for years. Is that going to be documented? Nope. But she's no longer with us. She couldn't take it anymore. A lot of these people are in and out of prison. There's more taxpayer dollars right there. If you're not spending the money on helping us become productive members of society, then you're going to spend money on either our burials or you're going to spend money on us in prison. 3 big things that we absolutely need to restructure. We have to have proper identification. We have to have mental health care, and we have to have medical until we can substantiate ourselves as adults. We're such a small society, 19,250 of us. The majority of those being adults. So let's just say 4,000 to 5,000 children. Well, I don't care if there's 5 of us. I committed no crimes to put me in the position that I'm in. I always said the witness protection program was more secretive than the CIA. Nobody, the numbers aren't out there. They're not answering our calls. There's nobody that we can really call. We are given this generic number that we can call or an address that we can write a letter to. We've all written the letters. We've all had them sent registered mail or return receipt. And, they always say that they don't get our letters, or people pass the buck on. Nobody's taking responsibility for an individual member. My ultimate goal absolutely would be to testify in front of Congress and tell them of the hardships that I've had personally, my family, and those around me that have reached out with the witness protection program and what struggles I face. They need to hear this. Why are we throwing money at something that is broken and not working? Let's admit it, organized crime isn't going away anytime soon. If we have organized crime, we're going to need witness protection, right? So we need to fix this because it's fundamentally flawed. So I'm getting louder with my release of my podcast, Relative Unknown. It is a 10-episode podcast. It's about an hour long each episode. It covers mental health, it covers witness protection, it covers the biker culture. So now I'm working on season 2 of Relative Unknown, and it's titled The Others. Their stories need to be told now. It's all fascinating. I'm excited to do this work, but do I want to be doing this work? No. I just want to live a happy life in Montana, out in my little mountain town that I have a bar and restaurant in. 51 years old, I finally found my people. I'm so happy and content there, and that's the life that I just want to live. I don't want to do this. I just want it to be over, and I can't go away until it's fixed.
Hi, I'm a producer and Authorized account. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe and comment with more topics that you'd like us to cover in this series.